Welcome, everyone. I'm Sam Hampton. I'm the Executive Director of the Social Justice Film Institute, and we are here at Columbia City Theater. I'd like to thank Rainier Avenue Radio and Front and Center for partnering. We're partners in this. Earth Deserves a Day. And I'll just tell you a little bit about the Social Justice Film Institute. We have a festival in the fall every year. We've been doing it for about 10 years. And all of our films and our mission is around social justice. Films that we're about to see right now are the kinds of films that we believe in, a part of our mission, and we feel strongly about what these films can do. This film this evening is called Necessity, Climate Justice, and the Thin Green Line. It's about the activism and the resistance of the oil transport along the Columbia River. And, visual storytelling and documentary film is a powerful tool and a call to action. So it's good to be here. And again, I'd like to thank Rainier Avenue Radio, and take care.
In August of this last year, I went to visit the tar sands for the first time in Alberta. It was a part of a first ever gathering of Indigenous resistance to tar sands. So all of us that are along this massive man-made destruction of the planet, coming to the actual source. So in the middle of it, Syncor has made a reclaimed area to show that they can make the land heal after they've extracted everything from it, where they have created this green field and put buffalo, bison there. Those bison are sitting in this place where they're terrified. Bison hold a special place in the Indigenous peoples of North America's teachings, our stories, our culture. It's a deep, deep piece of who we are. And so to put that being in that place, it was horrifying to see that. After that, we went and visited Cold Lake First Nation, which is surrounded on 3 sides by tar sands mine, and the 4th side is a military bombing site. So they are surrounded on all sides by chaos and destruction. The bison, to me, are reflective of the people that are at the source that are surrounded on all sides. The tar sands is the largest mine on the planet. It's visible from space. It's the size of the United Kingdom. It's a wound into the earth, and all the little methods of trying to get that wound expanded and pushed out into the world.
In the Pacific Northwest, we have this really strategic standpoint. We can hold what is called the Thin Green Line. The Thin Green Line is us, is activists, and if we can block fossil fuel exports from the West Coast, then we make it not profitable to extract anymore.
We look upstream and we can see that the fossil fuel industry involves these huge companies that produce tar sands through highly polluting operations in Alberta, or Bakken crude oil through fracking. And then you get to the next step, which is sort of the midstream, the pipeline operators, the people who run the oil train operations. And that's where we find ourselves, sort of a poorly paid middleman on a super highway for fossil fuels to export.
In the Northwest, we are aware of black snakes. They come through our territory by rail. There is one that if it falls off the track, it will blow up and burn. There's another that sheds its skin. It's called coal. That skin blows off those railways, those cars all through our lands. going into our water. Us, as the native peoples of this land, are listening to the ground. We are listening to the water. That concern is telling us that if irresponsible decisions are continued to be made, the fulfillment of prophecies that come from native people will come to be.
Climate change protest is underway in Northwest Portland right now.
Protesters have blocked the train tracks at the Zenith Energy plant in Northwest Portland. The group Extinction Rebellion is demanding the area be rezoned from an industrial corridor.
The date is April 28th, 2019. It's a sunny day in Portland at a railroad depot. There's a dump truck pulling up the railroad tracks. The dump truck dumps out a bunch of dirt, and soon people start entering the tracks. Shoveling dirt, planting a garden, and they start sitting on the tracks, posing for photo opportunities.
We warned them that if they continued, we'd have to have police show up and they would get arrested.
Did any of them leave at that point?
No, nobody left.
This is a unique case. There's not really a dispute between us and the state about the facts here. The dispute is over whether the actions of these defendants can be justified.
We wanted to go to trial, no matter what. We're telling our stories of why we did what we did. There was nothing else to do but to actually go to the site and stop the oil trains.
At the heart of this case is the choice of evils, which is ironic because it certainly seems more like a necessity than a choice at this time.
We fully expected to be arrested. We truly felt it was part of our strategy.
It's rare that we would put on evidence like this. But as jurors, you do have a choice. You can find that the defendants are not guilty.
This huge monster came up from the ocean. He would open his huge mouth and inhale anything that was in his path. He soon had all the salmon and other fish like sturgeon and eels, all eaten. And because he was so huge, he began taking in the deer and all food animals in the forest. Soon there was nothing left for the people. And they were getting hungry, and babies and old people began to die. Finally, someone went to Coyote and told him he would have to kill the monster. He got a length of a vine that is called Coyote's rope. He tied one end around his waist and coiled the other around his arm. He got some pitchy kindling and flints for starting a fire. He stood on a far hill and called the monster a shameful name. He teased him until the monster began trying to eat him. Every time the mouth opened, Coyote would throw out some useful thing. The monster was near collapsing. The fire got so hot that the monster died and went back into the sea. Some parts of him clung to the sides of the riverbank, so it was rough, like it was before Bonneville Dam was built.
When we think of tribes today, we are often thinking of the tribes as their political governments. For example, my traditional name is Tecumseh. I'm a citizen of the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs. I am Warm Springs, Wasco, Yakima, and Snoqualmie. When we start to look at the footprint that the Warm Springs and Wasco people occupied, it's quite a big region and not thoroughly defined because we were moving. We were following the resources.
A century and a half ago, Thomas Jefferson envisioned an empire of freedom and opportunity in the far Northwest.
A vast migration surging westward. Oregon was a land of fabled wonders.
Treaties were negotiated to end war. The desire to keep peace with tribal people was also an effort of nation building by the United States to move further west, and in the process to move Native people out of the way.
To build a colonial empire, sending out its boundless resources to the far corners of the earth.
The United States government has sent out agents to negotiate these treaties with tribes. We see a lot of treaties in 1855 here on the Columbia River as well as at Puget Sound.
The only way that our treaty was signed was because we allowed the railroad to go directly through the heart of our treaty.
Extending some 1,400 miles, the broad Columbia provides a natural gateway to this vitally important empire. Along the south bank roll Union Pacific freight trains, hauled by giant diesel locomotives.
My father was chief of our Ululupan people. They were told, if you do not sign this treaty, your people will be knee-deep in blood. They are ready to commit genocide, as they had across the continent.
The initial relationship was through the Department of War, which now is the Department of Defense, and then later became the Department of Interior. Got the reservation lands, ceded lands, and then in our treaties we also have specifically mentioned usual and accustomed lands. And that's where we would go and fish and hunt and gather our first foods and first materials. So our ability to access the Columbia River is in our usual and accustomed lands.
And it can truly be called an empire built on water. The mighty Columbia drains an area almost a third as large as Europe.
But an even greater conquest, one surely never dreamed of by the intrepid Lewis and Clark, when in 1805 their exploring eyes first beheld the mighty Columbia River, is Bonneville Dam, built by the government to provide power, production, and navigation in Columbia Gorge.
Looking at the United States in terms of nation building that was taking place in the 1800s, we had rail, and then we move into the early part of the 1900s, and that's when you have the invention and advent of electricity. The ability to serve not just industry, but also to put lights on for cities and residences. It had tremendous impact because tribes were utilizing that river one for transport themselves, but also for fish that are coming out from the Pacific.
Looking more like a placid lake, the waters of the Columbia River, backed up by the Dalles Dam, now flow peacefully over an area which once looked like this.
When my father was young, they would go to Slalo and fish, and we knew of it as a great gathering place, not only for food, but for trade. It was also a place where people bartered and arranged marriages, and kinship happened. And that's why She Who Watches is still looking down that river and our people. When I go and visit there and leave a sacred offering and prayer, she's still there with us and ever so powerful. When I bring my children there, we know. As we see the black snake go by us, we know she's watching.
The real question will be, what does the future hold? Dams or salmon? Because we understand the truth of the history that has materialized this lake behind us all today.
Building the dams that flooded the sacred sites along the Columbia River was an incredibly destructive act. Celilo, one of the most significant cultural places in the world, they flooded it with Dalles Dam. Really critically, it was the voice of the Native American fishing communities and the tribal leaders who stood up and spoke about why this was so destructive. And that was a dynamic we've seen replicated also with oil trains. So again, on the Columbia River, where people live and fish and make their way of life in that wedge of land between the rail line and the Columbia River. If you're a tribal fisher person, where would they go if there were to be a large oil train derailment and accident? One of the huge dynamics that really was inspiring about the oil train fight was people who were objecting to what Zenith was doing in Portland. They're making a stand that can actually benefit people that are hundreds of miles away that may not know them.
Oil trains through the gorge are a new phenomenon. Certainly we didn't see them a decade ago. It's a difficult issue for us to deal with as a volunteer department with one paid person. I've been with the district about 10 years. When we arrived in town, I started chatting with some people, and they told me that I actually had to either join the fire district or join the church. And you're not going to catch me in a church, so I joined the fire district. The gorge burns every year, and so we'll roll on quite a few fires during the summertime. There are some bark beetles that are killed by cold winters. And because we no longer get the kind of cold winters regularly enough to kill off these pine beetles, their range is expanding. And so if you look out over the hills of Mosier, you see a lot of dead trees. And these are being killed by these pine beetles as they move. All of a sudden you've got all these dead trees about, and they burn much more rapidly and more explosively than a live tree does. And the more you get climate change, the more fires you get, the more carbon is released, and the worse climate change gets.
Raise your right hand, please. Under the penalty of perjury, do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give, the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes. Living in Portland, we're not a fossil fuel region. We don't dig or extract fossil fuels. But about 7-8 years ago, it became apparent that the international energy economy was changing rapidly. And instead of being just a net consumer of fossil fuels, the United States and Canada became the largest producers of fossil fuels and exporters of fossil fuels. And suddenly our region was playing a much larger role in the international conversation about climate change because of the volumes of fossil fuels that were coming through. Originally, many of the investors were hoping that pipelines would be established to move most of this oil. What has happened is that both legally and in terms of protesting and activism, the opposition to that project has been very successful in delaying or stopping many of these pipeline projects. And in order to recoup on their investments, folks in large finance are investing in these oil by rail operations, which are a much more directly dangerous way of moving oil outside of the tar sands. And also, if projects are completed to extract all of this tar sands available, it's climate game over. So basically, if we were to burn all of the energy that you could get out of the tar sands, we would have no chance as a civilization of mitigating climate change anymore.
1855! Our land! Our land! Our treaty! Our treaty! 1855! 1855! Our land! Our land! Our treaty!
There's a constant struggle between the corporate dominance that has come through the reservation since the 1855 treaty.
This river is Nichiwanapum, this whole river, clear up to our homelands. This is where we used to live. Stone's throw away was where we were raised as children. This is our homeland.
The transport of coal and oil through the Columbia River Basin, those fracking equipment and resources passing through was an offense to tribal principles. The tribes, utilize that opportunity to make their stand. We don't want this passing through our land. We don't approve and we don't agree.
I was actually up in Seattle at the time, and my niece got a hold of me and said, "Auntie, you need to come down here. Folks are gonna come to help us stop this big beast of a machine called a megalode."
No consultation, no plastic!
We talked to our tribe about, have we been informed about this? What's going on? They're coming right through our ceded territory. So we had our big map of our ceded territory and the tribal boundaries. And we put that map up in front of that big truck and we said, no, you're not moving. You have to learn about our treaty rights that you're violating.
I have to pray for all the brothers and sisters along the riverways and roadways and every place that they're going to be affected by. It's going to change lives, it's going to hurt people. People are going to suffer.
Bottom of my heart, I knew that I had to do my best to stop it. So I laid down in front of it on top of our treaty. They picked me up, and there's the photo of me in the Hermiston Herald. When I'm getting booked, one of the first things one of the officers said to me was, "What, this is it? You're the only one?" It's kind of like just one old Indian woman. I stood up in front of the judge and said that this needed to be done and that I felt that, I was in the right.
This has gone too far. Our children are going to die from this. If we don't stop it now, it's going to be on our shoulders. Because they're going to say, where were you? Where was our tribe?
I'm just one grandma, one small voice in it that I was able to offer, at that moment, my body on the line.
Doing it for these little guys.
Since we last met inside a courthouse, in hindsight, did you feel like that arrest was worth it?
I do.
Yeah.
I do, because to know that I had chose to get arrested and had that happen, I think it made a statement for the community.
Oh no! People being willing to go to jail for a cause makes other people realize the seriousness of it. And that, I think, is part of the intention of a lot of the actions in the climate movement.
Okay, there's 3 basic phrases that I want you all to remember today, especially if you are risking arrest.
We strongly believe that knowledge is power. We know that when someone doesn't understand where the line is drawn between what is legal and what is illegal, they tend to self-censor themselves and back far away from where that line actually is.
I'm not going to resist you, officer, but I do not consent to any searches. If you are being detained or arrested, the cops are going to do a pat-down.
It was really important for activists to get more strategic about the choices that they were making with campaigns and with direct action, especially if part of their intention is taking that action to a courtroom. Symbolic actions, which are often tied to civil disobedience, would not meet most of the legal tests for the necessity defense, unlike direct action, where there has to be a causal connection between the act and the goal. Another one is you cannot contribute to the emergency itself. You can't make the emergency worse.
All right, to life.
My role was that right when we got to the facility, I was to call the NSF Railroad and Portland Police to let them know that there were protesters on the track so that it would be safe.
And was there safety tape that was used?
Yes, we put safety tape up. We had a safety officer designated, and we had a liaison to speak directly with Zenith Energy.
Was there any particular training that participants undertook prior to the event?
We all were trained in nonviolent civil disobedience.
Can you briefly describe your background?
I taught in Portland Public Schools for 30 years. I co-founded the Environmental Middle School in 1995.
I assume that environmental issues and climate issues were part of what you taught youth. Is that correct?
Yes. The idea was to have a classroom be larger than just the 4 walls. We rotated through the year of the mountain, the year of the forest, and the year of the river. During the year of the river, students would come to Cathedral Park. We would sit in a beautiful place. And then I'd ask the students, when you think of the word sanctuary, what do you think of? They shared, a holy place that's protected, where they would go to feel healthy and healed. And then I just said, now look out across the river, what do you see? And they could see the LNG tanks, trains, all these oil tanks. And I said, this is an industrial sanctuary. This was designated by the city of Portland as a sanctuary for industry. And the youth, you can imagine, they're just dumbfounded. Like, that's an oxymoron. It can't be a sanctuary and industry. Teachers like to fix things. We try to give the tools to make things better. And so I had a mini class on climate change. A big thread through that was activism. You learn about this, and then what can you do, and what are people doing?
Help us push this city in the right direction!
Fire drill is an alert to show that this is an emergency and we have to take action now. Instead of in a few years, it needs to happen now.
Instead of just sitting in this little bubble of fear and of just worry, I could actually be doing something.
When other people start joining you feel like, oh wow, there's like a whole bunch of other people that share my beliefs and are doing the same thing, so maybe we can make a difference.
Hello, hi. How are you doing?
Good.
It's good to see you.
Did you and the youth that you were working with engage in the city policies?
We did a lot. This is a picture of us at City Hall during the No New Fossil Fuel Infrastructure ban.
My name is Violet O'Haron. I'm a member of the Portland Youth Climate Council and a 7th grader at Ockley Green Middle School in North Portland. I want to start by saying thank you. It makes me feel hopeful to know the city of Portland is actively working on climate solutions. There's no single, simple solution to the climate crisis. It is clear, however, that there is no way we can solve it.
It's time for us all to wake up to what is also happening here in our beautiful Pacific Northwest.
I'm Graham from the Mosquito Fleet. We're a direct action organization that does fossil fuel resistance on all waterways in the Pacific Northwest.
A number of ships that have been coming up the Columbia River to the port of Vancouver, Washington, which is just across the river from Portland, Oregon, carrying pipe that's being used to build the Trans Mountain Pipeline. We're doing everything we can to stop it.
When the protesters came to protest the Trans Mountain Pipeline that was being delivered here, the kayak activists were out there. They stopped the ship. There was a lot of mixed feelings amongst our members. A lot of them were like, yeah, this is great. And the other ones were like, no, we want to go to work, get out of the way. The way it works is we don't have the right to pick and choose what cargoes we handle, right? We've got a contract with our employers, and whatever they bring in on a ship, we have to unload. We absolutely, as a union, understand it. We see what's being done in the First Nations, their land being taken away, and basically they're just being pushed aside. We sent some folks to Standing Rock and some money and supplies, which is kind of why when Tesoro tried to bring the oil export facility in here, that was an opportunity we had to say no, that we don't want to handle this cargo because it wasn't already here, right? If we were successful in keeping Tesoro out of here, then we were successful in not having to handle a cargo that we didn't want to. The second we heard about it, we took it to our membership meeting and unanimously voted to oppose.
The ILWU really started speaking up and raising questions about oil trains around the time of Lac Mégantic in 2013. They were early questioners of this whole operation. One of the very first meetings at the Port of Vancouver, and I was sitting next to one of the longshoremen when they said this. Someone from Tesoro Savage got up and said, this oil, this light sweet crude, it's like mother's milk. This was about 2 weeks before The Mother's Milk, derailed, exploded, and killed 47 people in Lac-Mégantic, Quebec. So the Mother's Milk quote didn't hold up very long.
We were scared. We know enough about Tesoro and all these other oil companies to know that they don't handle their product responsibly. No matter how much they say they do handle it responsibly, they don't.
Throughout the country, crude oil is safely on the move. Taking full advantage of our nation's vast rail system means we can maximize the benefits of our increased oil production. The railroads follow industry standards and government regulations to inspect and maintain their tracks.
Track safety is job number one around here. I walk my tracks every day.
The people that surround us in the communities are an asset to us, letting us come through their homes, basically.
We've seen spills. We've seen communities have to fight with these companies just to get the cleanup taken care of. It always has to go to court first. Who's going to pay for it? If they had an oil spill and it shut down the river, well, if we can't get ships up here, we're not going to be working. So how long are we going to be without work? We went to the Port Commission meeting. Well, the port was not happy. They were not happy at all about it. But, that's the beauty of our union, is there's really nothing they can do about us. That's what it's all about, voice in the workplace. It felt good to come out and say, yeah, we'd benefit from this, but we're not interested. The long-term effect would be horrible. And that's when the community grassroots movement got started. 100 people opposing it for every person that was in favor of it. But they were saying, oh yeah, you're gonna pay next to nothing in taxes around here. The schools are gonna get such a shot in the arm from this. That kind of argument was the only one they had. A bunch of suits with money. So, as a community, we targeted the Port Commission races.
This is our community. You can't buy us out. We are not for sale. Who's going back in with me?
We got Eric LeBrant elected, and he won in a landslide. So then we had one no vote. 2 yes votes for the terminal, 1 no vote. Well, obviously not enough to kill it.
A plume of black smoke rising above the gorge. Crude oil burning after 11 tankers derail near Mosier.
Interstate 84 is shut down. Do not travel out that way. We have a massive oil tanker fire in Mosier.
We were all cleaning out our desks for the end of the year, and we heard a big boom, and all the kids rushed to the windows, and we see a massive plume of smoke.
I just couldn't really believe it was really happening. So I went in the hallway to look at all the smoke and stuff.
Union Pacific had a unit train of Bakken crude oil, and a unit train means every single car on the train is the same commodity. And it was coming around this corner up here, and it derailed off the tracks, and basically the tracks split, and 4 of the cars caught fire. It was the only day we had in actually about a 35-day period that there was no wind. And because of that is why we have a town today. The school literally is right there. And there were 220 kids in session in the school.
We were all asked to evacuate. And because my dad is a firefighter, he rushed off. And my mom wasn't in town.
To get that call was terrifying. I was able to fly in that night, but I wasn't able to get into town because the traffic was so blocked. So there was no way into town.
Guess who else couldn't get here? The rescuers. Basically, right where we are is the only place for people to be able to get in or out of town was in the blast zone.
There were 30 to 50 foot flames coming off it. Decided very quickly that there was nothing we could do about the fire itself, but what we could do is try to protect some of the structures from the wildfire that had been started by the rail cars.
Our little town can deal with bushfires, can deal with somebody that's burning their slash pile that gets out of control, but there's nothing in us that is equipped to deal with this kind of product, and it sort of woke us all up.
Oil trains are a heavier, more dense cargo for the rails to deal. They're a different kind of fire to fight if they're on fire. they're a different kind of hazard to deal with if they derail and spill.
The thing that hit everyone so hard was, in every helicopter shot of this fire, there's the school. There's the playground where there were a couple hundred kids.
Everyone just held their breath. I mean, everybody was just scared to death, especially when we found out it was right near the school.
We need to immediately start phasing out oil trains, period. They're not safe.
We had the mayor, the fire chief, the families, our senators, activists, indigenous people from that area. Everybody said, we have to stop this.
They represent a rolling time bomb, and citizens are right to have grave concerns.
My message to the residents is I'm very sorry, and that we're not going to leave here until everything is in order.
Today, the city council found out that they were opening up the tracks next to a number of oil tanks that have not been emptied yet. They had the big community press meeting, big show. We're going to do all this wonderful stuff for your area. The moment they were done with that community meeting, they started the trains.
So why risk it? When I look at the cars, they're just a few feet away from the operating train.
They are a few feet away. However, they are not posing an issue with the rail cars. There are a lot of companies that are counting on us.
It boggles the mind that that wasn't the event that led to a total stop of oil trains coming through the Columbia River Gorge. We found almost no traction at either the state or the federal level, at least in Oregon, for years, even after Mosier. You could see the railroad industry, their lobbyists were very effective.
You know, talked with our senators about it, our Congress people. I asked them, you know, what can you do to help us out? And they're like, you know, there's nothing we can really do to the railroad. That doesn't make sense. You're an elected official. You're in the Senate. You're telling me that you can't make laws to govern the railroad?
Realizing that it's difficult to stop these trains along the tracks, people have found a real opportunity to take some action at the actual terminal level. They are going to the place generating the oil train traffic itself, a place like Zenith or Tesoro Savage.
From Vancouver voters, they do not want the nation's largest oil-by-rail facility built in their downtown.
Voters overwhelmingly supported Port Commissioner candidate Don Orange over candidate Chris Green, who got hundreds of thousands of dollars from oil interests.
The port has a signed lease for the oil terminal project, but port commissioners regularly vote whether to keep that lease. Don Orange starts his term in January with a campaign promise to cancel that contract, along with current Commissioner Eric LeBrant.
At that point, we had 2 no votes, enough to kill it, and that was it. And now we've got all this area out here for windmills. So behind me, we're surrounded right now by the blades. When you're going up the gorge and you see the windmills up on the hill, there's a lot of pieces that make that thing go, and we're lucky enough to handle all those pieces here.
I think for so long there's been this kind of argument between like jobs versus the environment. The Green New Deal really turns that on its head. It's not just a single bill or policy. It's about a complete paradigm shift.
The Green New Deal concept is one that helps affirm and supports our stewardship responsibility to resources. I come to the study of law with this inherent understanding of what we call, in our tribes, the unwritten laws. And those are the laws that we're told by our elders we carry in our hearts. We're there to speak for resources that can't speak for themselves. What I would hope is that there is consideration with regard to how tribes can participate in that, how that can be effective in supporting of our interests around specifically energy issues.
Like our Atway Uncle Billy Frank said, every time you pull that light bulb, a salmon jumps out because he sacrificed his life to give you that energy.
Looking at the hydro system, there is no question that it is not a clean form of energy. It produces hot water, and that's lethal to fish. That it is different than fossil fuel pollution. We have a responsibility to take that head on and not to pretend that these systems have no pollution impact, because they do.
There is a point where if you don't lay down for peaceful civil disobedience, they're simply not going to listen to you.
We need to demand that our elected leaders and public officials start telling the truth, and they need to act fast. And when we write them letters, when we show up to make public comment, and they don't listen, then we're going to take it up a notch until they do have to face what they have been ignoring and lying about for decades.
Defense calls Emily Carl. Under the penalty of perjury, do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth? I do. Yes, you can.
I've tried every legal thing, everything that we're supposed to do for change, but change isn't happening quick enough. And so that's why I decided to act.
Do you believe your action was necessary on April 28th?
Absolutely.
To see suddenly an old facility becoming an export oil terminal, I mean, it was terrifying to us that this could happen in our city.
Tar sands oil from Canada, the worst oil that there is, carbon-wise, in Portland.
Because they are using old permits from before this ban came into being.
The youth were part of the fossil fuel ban. They testified. We wrote letters to the editor. We had rallies. We had forums where we had invited speakers to talk about Zenith Energy and the problems. The students met with city officials. The mayor told us many times that his hands were tied. They were looking into every legal action that they could take, said, you know, we agree, this is a danger to our community and we don't want them here, but we don't know what to do.
I worked diligently with these youth to go through every single process that we possibly could. And then basically nothing ever happened with this resolution, nothing.
By the time the resolution came for a final vote, corporate utilities had successfully pushed the date back by 5 years to 2035.
I felt like they were giving them a lot of false hopes and that we need to take a different course. It wasn't working.
I'm tired of waiting for the city and the county and the government to do something. We're out of time, and that's why I'm here.
At some point, we knew that nothing was going to happen. And so there was nothing else to do but to actually go to the site and stop the oil trains.
This garden grow. All you need is a rake and a hoe and a piece.
We were able to utilize the necessity defense. By setting up the blockade where they were drawing attention to the expansion area, as well as stopping bomb trains from entering into the facility and then leaving again for export purposes.
Mr. Davenport, is Zenith in the business of transporting and facilitating tar sands oil?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
If the transport of fossil fuels is reduced or stopped, would you agree that that reduces carbon emissions?
That's not my area of expertise.
Are you aware of Zenith's plans to expand their facility?
I'm not aware of any expansion.
Would you agree that there is a safety concern in moving fossil fuels by train?
It's not my area of expertise.
Have you ever heard of the term bomb trains?
I have.
And what does that refer to?
That was their words, so I don't know why they refer to them as bomb trains.
You're not aware of any fossil fuel train cars exploding?
I am, but they just don't explode. They've exploded from wrecks or derailments.
Did you like getting arrested and going to jail?
No, I did not like getting arrested and going to jail. It was uncomfortable, it was scary. It put a lot of stress on my family. It's not something I ever thought I would do, but I felt compelled to do it.
Why would someone with your background risk their liberty and get arrested and go to jail and end up as a defendant?
I made a promise to my children and to the youth that I work with, my students. I have a grandbaby who is 6 weeks old, and I'm afraid for her future if we don't collectively take action. And that is really why I blocked the oil train, because I'm protecting my children, my grandbabies, my grandchildren, the youth that I work with, from this industry that is knowingly harming them and the planet.
The state bears the burden of proving the elements in a criminal case. For this charge, there are exactly 2 elements. First, the date, on or about April 28th of 2019. And second, that the defendants knowingly entered or remained unlawfully on railroad tracks. 2 simple elements.
We would like you to keep your minds open. The state has the burden of proof, both regarding the elements of the crime, but also to disprove our defense.
The existential crisis of climate change, that goes on one set of scales, and then trespassing goes on the other set of the scales. And the jury is basically meant to balance those 2 harms. And that is often the most difficult part of a necessity defense, because most people are still in the mindset of a law and order mentality.
April 28th, you were at the Zenith tracks with Mr. Ford, right? That is correct. All right, and you knew you were on train tracks, right? Yes.
Did you believe that your direct action was a lesser harm than Zenith's harm in exacerbating climate change?
Yes. Our harm, planting a garden, is up against a significant contributor to the ending of the conditions that make civilization possible. I don't think there's any comparison.
Why didn't you just vote or lobby at the national level?
I mean, we did. We have.
It's going to be up to regular people to organize themselves, because their government is not going to do it for us. And it's going to require an enormous amount of courage.
Each and every juror must agree on your verdict. So, whether your verdict is not guilty or guilty, all of you must agree on the verdict. After you've reached your verdict, we will reconvene the parties. All rise for the jury.
Whenever I see an oil train, I always feel like a pit in my stomach, just like a little dread.
We originally thought that we would ask for all of the money to be given to building a new school. They weren't interested. They wanted to support emergency services.
We replaced our 30-odd-year-old engine with this thing behind us. And they've also provided some money for a new building, showers and things like that in it, which would be rather nice. Our fire chief resigned. He was deeply stressed by the incident. The fact that everybody was dealing with things that were so far out of our usual experience that it was just a bit traumatic. Now, that's not to say we don't have community anymore, but I feel like we were closer before.
The term railroaded is common on purpose, right? They have a lot of power. What surprised me was that the tribes were able to help.
Will we be the generation that forgot those who are coming behind us, those yet unborn? Will we be the generation that forgot to speak for the resources that cannot speak in a manner that we can understand?
Turns out their treaties preempt the railroad. So they have been able to work together to save the gorge from some of these advancements that were to cut off the towns and the people from the river.
Started to see more and more tribes who were being affected by these projects coming together and supporting each other.
What kind of wake-up call do we need? I can't even fathom to think that those children were in school at that time. They're not my children. I'm not related to them, but they were there.
All right, so with the jury. Everyone can be seated. All right, members of the jury, I want to thank you for your service in this case. I am going to find, based on your statements, or at least 5 of your statements, that further deliberation would not be helpful to you. So I will declare a mistrial in this case.
They deliberated for a day and a half and came back and said, 5 of us want to acquit and 1 of us won't be swayed, and the judge declared a mistrial. The state decided to not re-prosecute them, and so the state dismissed all of the charges against them, and they ended up engaging in a direct action on camera without getting any convictions.
Today, these 3 Portlanders are celebrating what they call a major win.
It is for sure a victory.
5 of the 6 jurors found the defendants not guilty, even though they never denied their guilt.
Never.
Never.
We advertised it, actually.
Portland attorney Greg Kafour says the fact that the majority of the jury found the defendants not guilty.
It's an enormously important legal victory. Going forward, if other judges have the courage to adopt this defense, you're going to see a great deal more direct action against the most severe environmental polluters.
The fact that 5 out of the 6 jurors felt that we were not guilty was a huge win and set the precedent for future activists. And especially right now, when the time is whittling away, it's an opportunity for the kind of justice that we've been working towards.
It's going to take more. It's going to take more direct action. It's going to take more rights being put on the line. And it's going to be more younger people that have to understand that corporate entities are not going to care about us because we are in sacrifice zones.
In me, Manaimuma, she cook na shwa pina clarisha mechsinwet, Iwa wayausaks, I katsiaya pusha, I katsiaya kathla. We're here this early morning for prayer for the peoples of this land, this water, this air. At Nihawe, I katsiaya, we offer these blessings. It is such a sacred time, and we have to know that within that sovereign right comes a huge responsibility for us to continue teaching, not only within our own families and children and tribes, but to non-Native people as well, so they have an understanding of why we are still here. Kwali Som Chana, we're not going anywhere, we're staying.
voice of our forefathers sings. The will to live will be done. We will no longer be pawns to greed and to war. We will be idle no more. And we must stand for the right to be free. And we will rebuild a just society. And we will sing, we will sing, we will sing our own song. And we will stand for the right to be free. And we will rebuild a just society. And we will sing, we will sing, we will sing our own song. When the ancient drum rhythms ring, the voice of our grandmother sings. Native America run, we will no longer succumb to oil and to ore. We will be idle no more. And we must stand for the right to be free. And we will rebuild our own society. And we will sing, we will sing, we will sing our own song. And we will teach about the right to be free. And we will rebuild our own society. We will sing, we will sing, we will sing our own song. Oh, dance, dance for the right to be free. We will rebuild our own society. And we will sing, we will sing, we will sing our own song. And then run away and occupy for the right to be free. And we will rebuild a just society. And we will sing, we will sing, we will sing our own song.
Rainier Avenue Radio.
Did you know that there's an updated COVID-19 booster that protects you even more than the original vaccines? Even if you got the first vaccinations, now it's time to get this new updated booster shot. It's especially important for adults 50 and over and people with a compromised immune system. Even though you may not hear about people catching COVID as often, each week in King County, some people even end up in the hospital because of it. So check with your loved ones and make sure they've gotten an updated booster. For more information on where to get a COVID vaccine, including free vaccination resources, visit kingcounty.gov/vaccines. kingcounty.gov/vaccines.
The beat of the Fox with nastiness is back on K-Fox Night Beat.
Yo, what's the deal? It's the legendary Hall of Fame DJ Mixmaster Ice from UTFO.
What's up? Who you thought this is? This is Sir Mix-a-Lot.
And this is Terry Lewis.
And I'm Grand Mixer GMS.
What's up, y'all? This is DJ Third Degree.
This is JJ Hudson from the High Children family.
Sunday nights from 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. It's K-Fox Night Beat with DJ Nastiness.
Bringing back the memories.
Bringing back the memories.
Bringing Seattle's hottest music.
Bringing Seattle's hottest music. Rainier Avenue Radio .world.
That's my noise. Peace.
You're listening to Rainier Avenue Radio .world. I'm Granville Emerson along with my partner, Ronald Pepe T. And we host the show Little Line Sports right here on Rainier Avenue Radio .world, where we talk about football, basketball, local sports, national sports, Seahawks, UW, Seattle U Redhawks, Garfield Bulldogs, all that and more right here on Little Line Sports on Rainier Avenue Radio .world.
Did you know there's an easy way to keep yourself and your loved ones healthy? COVID vaccines are safe and a proven way to keep your family out of the hospital and enjoying life. Let's show our love to those around us. Get your free COVID vaccine today. If you haven't had a COVID shot since September, you're due for a booster. At NeighborCare Health, we are here for you. For more information about COVID vaccines and all of your health needs, visit neighborcare.org/vaccines.
You are listening to Rainier Avenue Radio,
your community radio station.
Welcome back. We hope you liked that film called Necessity, the movie, Climate Justice and the Thin Green Line. My name is James Lee. I'm with Front and Centered, and I'm really happy to be here with the folks at Rainier Avenue Radio in this beautiful Columbia City Theater space. Thank you again for joining us for day two. We've had a great day two starting at 10 in the morning. We had a great conversation with our friends Johnny and Nico and Dan talking about Indigenous perspectives on climate justice. We moved from that discussion to a talk with our Front and Centered staff member, Isabel, speaking to folks down the West Coast in California and Chiapas, Jennifer and Karine, talking about what environmental justice means to them in the work that they do. And then the afternoon, you heard from Jill and Edgar, and Jill in particular was speaking to Tani Ikeda and Michelle Kumada, talking about how they use art as activism to uplift the stories of Japanese American families in Bellevue. And you may have noticed that we had to skip on our 3 o'clock interview. We do apologize if you tried to tune into that, but you just saw a great film tonight called Necessity, the movie. Again, it's called Necessity, the movie, Climate Justice and the Thin Green Line. I want to talk to you a little bit about what we have going on tomorrow. Before I do that, I wanted to just quickly mention, talk about why we're here in this space and why we as Front and Centered are partnering with Rainier Avenue Radio and with the Social Justice Film Festival and MOHI to bring you this week-long series of events. We're here because we are a coalition of about 70 different member organizations across Washington State. And if you watched this film just now, you know that our Earth needs more than one day. We need more than one day to steward it, to protect it, and to save our planet. And so we really want to be out here to highlight the work that is happening in our member organizations across Washington State every single day, outside of Earth Day, outside of this week, people who are on the front lines fighting to save our planet, to save our communities, and to keep our families whole and safe. And so moving on to tomorrow, I'm really excited to talk to you about what we have for tomorrow. In the morning, we're going to have a radio interview with Nick Jeffries of the Urban League of Metropolitan Seattle. Nick and Tony are going to talk to you about Youth Today, Leading Tomorrow. We're going to follow that up with a webinar hosted by our Front Centered staff member, Rebecca, who will be speaking to Yolanda Sinde of the Global African Community Initiative. Yolanda will be joined by some other panel guests from different countries in Africa. And so if you want to tune into that, that's going to be at 11:30. We'll have another episode of On the Front Lines for you with Jill. Jill's going to be talking to Tara Villalba about nuclear power and nuclear energy in Washington State and why we should all be concerned about that. And then at 3 o'clock, you're going to hear from Julianne and Zephyr from Mason County Climate Justice, who are working to save Sherwood Forest on the Kitsap Peninsula. And then Wednesday evening, we hope you'll all turn out. We have a great youth event going on at 5 o'clock. For those of you who are watching the streaming broadcast, we'll start officially at 5:30. The stream will go live at 5, but the proceedings will be at 5:30. But yeah, if you're in the area, come down to the space here at 4916 Rainier Avenue South, excuse me. Come down and check out our youth event. We're gonna have youth coming in from different parts of Washington State to talk about what environmental justice and climate justice means to them. And we're handing the mic over to them. They're going to lead that discussion for a couple hours here tomorrow evening. So please join us. Please tune into our week-long series of events. You can go to calltoconscience.world or to frontendcentered.org to see our full schedule. And thank you so much for joining us and for listening to Rainier Avenue Radio. Thank you.